Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely epic rags-to-riches business case study. We're looking at the extraordinary journey of a boy who started with literally nothing and eventually took on a massive corporate monster. It's really a masterclass in grit, observation, and spotting the exact opportunities that giants ignore. And honestly, these lessons apply just as much today as they did a century ago. So grab your notepads because we're going to break down the unbelievable origin story of Sam Zemurray's banana empire.
Okay, let's dive into this. Every massive empire has to start somewhere, right? Well, for Sam, his initial life-changing investment was just $50. Now, to put that into perspective, $50 back then is roughly equivalent to about $5,340 today. Not exactly enough to fund a Silicon Valley tech startup, sure, but for him, it was absolutely everything he had in the world. And to understand why he was willing to bet it all on one crazy idea, we really need to look at exactly where he came from.
Let's walk through this timeline to see how his story builds, because you have to understand the stakes here. Born in 1877 in a small village in western Russia to a poor farming family, his life was completely upended when his father passed away. Sam was just 10 years old. Financial ruin followed, and survival just became a grueling daily struggle for him and his mother. By age 14, in a desperate bid to change his destiny, he makes the incredibly heart-wrenching decision to leave his mother behind and migrate to America, completely alone. Fast forward to age 16, and a chance encounter with what was, at the time, a pretty exotic fruit, the banana, changes the entire trajectory of his life. The stakes couldn't have been higher here. This was purely a fight for survival.
Chapter 1. The 14-year-old immigrant. Imagine arriving in a chaotic new country without a word of English, no money, and just a scrap of paper with an address.
So after tracking down his uncle just to secure basic food and shelter, this teenager immediately hit the pavement. He took on whatever odd jobs he could find, working as a helper in local shops, sweeping warehouses, you name it. But here is the crucial point, and your first major takeaway. He didn't just work, he studied the market. He was incredibly observant. While he was sweeping floors or doing door-to-door deliveries, he treated every single interaction as a literal masterclass in how business actually works. He listened to what customers wanted, he watched how suppliers operated, and he absorbed everything like a sponge. He saved every penny he made, just waiting patiently for the absolute right opportunity to strike.
Chapter 2. Finding the Market Gap. Sam quickly realized that doing odd jobs was never going to change his life. He had to go straight to the source. So he travels to a chaotic port in Alabama, where thousands of dollars are trading hands daily. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive inefficiency he spotted at the docks. The dominant player, the United Fruit Company, had this incredibly rigid three-step sorting process. Step 1. Perfectly green bananas were loaded onto trains for national shipping because they had a nice long shelf life. Step 2. Yellow bananas, which were just starting to ripen, were sold at a discount to local traders. But Step 3 was where Sam's eyes went wide. The spotted, overripe bananas, they were simply tossed aside and sent to the dump.
Get this, a staggering 15% of the total shipment was being thrown away as waste. To a corporate behemoth like United Fruit, these bananas couldn't survive a long transport, so to them, they were totally useless. But to Sam, a boy who remembered the bitter days of going hungry back in Russia, throwing away perfectly edible fruit was just insane. He saw an absolute gold mine right where everyone else just saw a pile of garbage.
Chapter 3. A race against time. Taking a massive leap of faith, Sam walked right up to the monopoly's executives and bet his entire $50 life savings to buy their trash.
The corporate suits happily took his money, probably thinking this 16-year-old kid in tattered clothes was just out of his mind. But now, what's really interesting about this is the ticking clock element. How do you actually sell rotting fruit on a delayed train? In theory, Sam's plan to put those bananas on a train and sell them in neighboring towns was genius. In reality, the train he boarded was agonizingly slow. It was constantly stopping for cargo loads, driver changes, track clearances. As the train sat idle for hours, Sam could literally watch his bananas changing color, growing softer and closer to rotting by the minute. If he waited until the final destination, his entire investment would be completely ruined.
So what does he do? In a desperate, brilliant pivot, Sam jumps off the train at one of the stops and sprints to a Western Union telegraph office. He frantically messages local merchants, street vendors, and grocery store owners at all the upcoming train stations along the route. His pitch was incredibly simple. I have a massive shipment of cheap bananas heading your way right now, and I will give you a commission for everything you help me sell.
And it worked. The strategy was a spectacular success. At every single stop, a crowd of eager buyers was waiting for him. By the time the train finally reached its last destination a week later, he had completely sold out. He walked away with $190 total in his pocket. Not only had he survived this massive gamble, but he definitively proved that his low-margin, gap-exploiting strategy worked. The major lesson here? He found a highly lucrative space that the giant monopolies were just too arrogant to even notice.
Chapter 4. Threatening the Banana Monopoly. Sam relentlessly repeated this exact process. By 1903, his sales hit the millions, officially making him a direct threat to the biggest giant in the industry.
Let's compare this classic Goliath and David matchup. On one side, you have the United Fruit Company. They're relying on boardroom strategy, fighting over premium green bananas, and maintaining complex, high-margin distribution networks. On the other side, you have Sam, pure boots-on-the-ground execution, dealing strictly in rejected fruit and using simple, fast, direct sales. Why was Sam winning? Because he was playing an entirely different game, one that the executives in their fancy suits were simply too proud to play.
But, giants do not like being challenged. United Fruit deployed aggressive corporate squeeze tactics to systematically crush Sam's profit margins. They suddenly started delaying his shipments at the docks. Some days, they'd look at his order and only give him half the supply he demanded. And in a ruthlessly calculated move, United Fruit even started dumping their own cheap fruit into the market at rock-bottom prices. It was perfectly engineered to bleed out independent traders like Sam.
Chapter 5. Taking the ultimate risk. Sam realized pretty quickly that relying on his direct competitors for his supply was a death sentence. If he wanted to survive, he had to build his own farms. To secure 100 acres in Central America and his own shipping fleet, Sam needed massive upfront capital. So, he partners with an investor named Ashbel Hubbard. And here is the wildest, most shocking piece of irony. The United Fruit Company actually stepped in and invested to get a 10% stake in his new venture. They completely underestimated him. They probably thought they could keep this young upstart on a short leash by controlling a piece of his pie. Man, they had no idea what they were unleashing.
Because Sam didn't run his new farms from a cushy office back in America. Oh no. He relocated directly to the jungles of Central America. His relentless ground-level execution was just completely unmatched. He lived in malaria-infested jungles. He literally wielded a machete and worked the mud-soaked soil right alongside his laborers. He personally negotiated with government officials and local power brokers. He even built an entire village to support his workers. His practical, hands-on knowledge became light years ahead of those executives back in the States. It is the absolute ultimate proof that there is simply no substitute for getting your hands dirty and understanding your product at the ground level.
Now, seeking to expand even faster, Sam wanted to buy more land, but traditional banks flat out refused to loan him the money, citing the extreme risks of jungle farming, like floods and pests. His partner, Hubbard, wanted to play it safe and just pay off their current debts. Sam completely disagreed. So in a breathtakingly risky move, Sam actually went to the criminal underworld and borrowed the money at a staggering 50% interest rate. Can you even imagine that kind of pressure? 50%! He used that shady money to buy out his hesitant partner, taking 90% control of the company himself and leaving United Fruit with their original 10%. He bet absolutely everything he had.
He'd put it all on the line. But what happens when an aggressive, boots-on-the-ground banana business outgrows its competitors and starts brushing up against the actual power of nations? This final all-or-nothing gamble perfectly sets the stage for our next explainer, where we'll uncover how this humble fruit trader ends up toppling governments and completely reshaping the geopolitical landscape of Central America. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss how this underdog playbook turns into an actual empire. I'll see you in part 2.